Now, this isn't NBC Sports and
Sure.
Caffeine and Octane, so just relax. I mean, there's nothing to worry about. Anyway, I'll introduce myself. There we go. Anyway, hello everybody. This is Mike Teese with Wheels Events TV, and I have an opportunity here to introduce you to a couple friends of mine who I really am very proud of. And to get started with is that this is an extremely relaxed. We don't try to make this. There's going to be no production. I might get a title screen on it,
Nice.
and that's only depending whether or not I can convince my wife to take time off to do it, because
Nice.
this is not fancy, but that's one of the reasons why I think people enjoy watching it. We don't pretend to be anything. It's not one of these things where you're talking off to the side to somebody and they're
Yeah.
pretending it's fake drama and all that. Anyway, on the screen, you're going to be on my left at this point.
Yep.
Would be Rob Rescue.
Yeah.
I love it. Rescue. And Dave Markert. And actually, Dave is the name of the company that we're sitting at today. And actually, I think your adventure started long before Markert Automotive, right?
Yes.
So there's a story here, and I've been intrigued. I've gotten pieces of it with some of your friends and staff, and so let's just take a few minutes and tell it. What got you into this? What was your first inkling that this was your direction that you were going in?
So we basically have two beginning stories that converged
I love that.
about midway through our history, if you will. I bought a older BMW right out of high school, a 98 328. I proceeded to play with it and drive the doors off it, and subsequently blow it up a couple times. My parents helped me out with my first year of college, and that's basically it. They said, go. And so I blew it up and used a little bit of what was left of my college money to try to fix it, and then from there I was all on my own and had to figure out how to get in there and fix everything I screwed up every bit of the way, from maintenance and service stuff till I it's infamously called a money shift. I actually tossed the motor in it, had 116,000 miles on it at that point, and I did a 3-2 shift at full speed, and all the valves went bang. Racing one of my buddies up in Clemson, and so I had to figure out how to put a motor in it. That was fun and exciting, and then broke that motor again, had to figure out how to do a head gasket, stole my dad's Craftsman tools out of his garage that were 25 years old, and worked at in the gravel at the lake house I lived at in Clemson. No garage, no lift.
Jack sand sinking in
it was fun. You got about 15 minutes after you put a car on the jack stands before you had to jack it back up again, because it would sink down into the dirt, which was 100 feet off the water at the lake. So I worked there for a while and met a couple car buddies, and I started tinkering with their cars, and we had a little group of car buddy people. And then about 07, I'd say 08, actually started tinkering heavily. I had a couple jobs in college that paid me $6 an hour or whatever, and in addition to tinkering on my car, my friends would throw me a bone here and there to work on theirs. And then I started bought another busted BMW, and another it was an 87 325, the first beater, and that was in a various state of disrepair. Rebuilt that whole thing. My roommate actually crashed it, and I ended up parting it out. And when I parted it out, I was like, wow, there's a bunch of money to be made in parting cars out. So in addition to tinkering here and there, I would part cars out. And so I'd buy a wrecked car off Copart, and I'd take it apart and sell it on the forums and whatnot.
And so where were you doing all this?
My apartment garage. There was a 2-car garage underneath my apartment in college. In
So
Clemson.
all this time you're going to school.
Yes.
And you're working on cars.
Yeah. So
when did you have time for drinking and beer girls?
there wasn't much of that. Yeah, I between school
You know,
and
Clemson's noted party school.
Yeah,
You're really
yeah.
missing a piece of your education.
yeah.
Well, that's where my story comes in.
I missed out on all that shenanigans, but did that for a couple years. Actually met Rob on the forums.
That's a good place.
I wrecked my car in 07-ish into a ditch drifting by my parents' house. And again, didn't have any money, no body shop, no nothing. Had to cobble it together with random bits and pieces. Needed a fan, a condenser, and bumper, and stuff like that. And so I didn't have any money, so I scoured the interwebs, and he had put an M3 bumper on his car, and so I bought his stock bumper from him in a Wendy's parking lot for like $50 or something. And that's the first time we ever met in person.
Still have it today, right?
Yeah, over in Alpharetta. I drove out to a Wendy's parking lot and gave him $50 for it, and then he ironically wrecked his car about 6 months or a year later, and totaled it and had to convert it back to stock. So he bought my stock bumper or my stock exhaust and a couple other things before the insurance took it off. And so we after that started hanging out and tinkering. He got a E36, another one, and he started going to UGA, and he would drive up to Clemson from UGA, and we would tinker on his car and or his car parts in my apartment garage, because I had, tools and air compressor, no lift, still nothing, but bunch of jacks, and had a nice big long garage. And so after that started happening a lot, I actually started making a business out of it and making myself known on the forums. I would drive down to Atlanta and meet people in their driveway and fix the car in the driveway. And then I did a 24 valve swap on my roommate's car. I put the newer engine into the older car, and did all the wiring integration, whole 9 yards, and got an established reputation for that. So I would tow people's cars up from Atlanta, and in my apartment garage, do an engine swap on their car, 60 hours of labor, and charge them, $500 or something. Broke college student, just needed anything I could get, and do an engine swap on their car, and then tow it back to Atlanta and deliver it to them. And I got a reputation for that. I started doing custom wiring harnesses online for people all over the country, all out of my apartment garage. Probably about 2010, I got kicked out of my apartment garage by the city. There were a bunch of broken BMWs all in the...
Well, and, parted out parked cars.
Yeah.
I bet the neighbors loved you.
Yeah.
That whole zoning thing.
Yeah.
Those got a sense of humor.
They
got to get a sense of humor.
I had a local tow truck driver with a rollback that was actually good enough to where he could back the rollback into the garage. There was 1.5 inches on each side, and scoop up a parts shell, like just the tub, after I'd taken all the parts off it. And he'd take it off and get, $200 for it, scrap metal or whatever. But, so I rented a chicken coop behind a used tire place about 10 miles outside of Clemson in Pendleton. It was $200 a month. It was a 2-bay little 800 square foot place. There were literally chickens everywhere. They would lay eggs like inside the shop if you didn't keep the bay doors closed, and so on and so forth. And again, all the while,
there's an extra benefit there.
Yeah, exactly.
No lift still.
Yeah, no lift still. Rob's still coming up. I got a bunch of customers now coming up from Atlanta because I'm not charging enough money, and I'm cheap, and I just like doing it, and still parting out cars here and there.
You're still in college.
Yeah. So,
what was your major all of a sudden?
Industrial engineering. Yeah.
Excellent.
So, did that for was at the chicken coop for about 1.5 years. Graduated in August of 11 from college. I interviewed at a bunch of places in Greenville, all the OE suppliers to BMW, got a bunch of job offers from Bosch and ZF and Borg Warner and stuff for, 50, 60, 70 grand a year starting. And my girlfriend at the time, I think we were engaged by then. Yeah, 2011. Yeah, we were engaged by then.
Is this, you still with her?
Yeah. It's my wife now. 6 years married.
Well, there's somebody who deserves an award.
Yeah, exactly. So she was down in Atlanta, living with her grandmother. She had graduated college on time. I was 1.5 years, 2 years late. We're the same age. She graduated in 2009, and I graduated in 2011. But she wanted me to move back to Atlanta. She didn't want to move up to Greenville, and I didn't really want to be up there. So I had to once I told my landlord at the chicken coop that I was thinking about moving out, he said, okay, we'll just play it by ear. And then came up to me the next week and said, you got 3 days to get out of here. And I'm like, well, I got like 4 parts cars in a million pieces, car parts everywhere, tools everywhere, a couple customer cars. And I found a warehouse space underneath a Mexican restaurant on the south side of Lawrenceville for like $1,000 a month. And I was like, oh, just throw all my stuff in there and then I'll get a real job and I'll just, do whatever. And so emergency rented it, just jumped in there, signed the lease, didn't know what I was doing.
And where's this?
Off East Krogan Street, basically right by Rose Jordan Park.
Yeah.
About 2 miles from here.
Yeah, I know.
So there's a little strip mall that, if you look at it from the road, it looks like just strip mall, but it's actually 2 stories. You can go around back, and there's 14-foot ceiling warehouse space underneath it.
Yeah, there's a guy with a tire shop in there at one point.
Yeah. So I got, I signed a lease and threw all my stuff in there. No lifts, no nothing. Just, it was 3,500 square feet, a warehouse space, and just threw all my crap in there. Had car parts like covering almost the entire floor space, a couple customer cars, and started looking for a job around Atlanta. And all the customer base I'd built up started talking like, oh, he's in Atlanta now. So I started getting more and more customers, and all the while trying to look for a real job. And then just came to the decision one day, probably in November, December of 2011. I was like, well, I just do the car thing, make a business out of it. And so started basically by myself working on cars, had customer cars, doing engine swaps and 5-speed swaps and maintenance and repair and all sorts of stuff, just word of mouth on the internet, handing business cards out in parking lots and stuff, no advertising, no marketing, no business acumen, no nothing, no invoicing, no point of sale, no QuickBooks, just flying by the seat of my pants. And so I did that, had like one random employee for a couple of minutes, and then did that by myself for about 1.5 years. Brought Rob on as an employee in 2012. He was working here and there for his old man's cabling company, and wanted to try to do his own thing and blah blah. So he came in and did engine swaps for me. I just pay him a flat amount to do an engine swap because I was, I had a reputation for doing these engine swaps, and he did that for probably 3 or 4 months, and he started trying to help with the business side of things because he's got a business degree from UGA, and realized that it was just a disaster. I just ruined everything. I had no business sense at all whatsoever. And all the customers were starting to hate me, blah, blah. Someone would drop their car off, and they're like, oh, it's broken. I've been to 10 different shops. No one can figure it out. And I'm like, okay, I can figure it out. And I'd call them like 2 weeks later, and I'm like, I fixed it. And they're like, where have you been? Like, I've been calling, you never answer. Like, I'm like, well, I fixed it. You wanted me to fix. No one else could fix it. You wanted me to fix it. I fixed it. And they're like, no, you can't. Where's the quote, an invoice, a call, something? I'm like, look, you no business sense at all whatsoever. So he was like, you're crazy. I'm out of here. So he left, and it was back to myself again for about 9 months. And then I hired Ray, who's one of our technicians here. He started sweeping the floors for me. He was a customer, and he was a manager at Jimmy John's.
I tried hiring him while I was still there because we needed help, and he wouldn't leave his job because
he was making $9 an hour, $10 an hour, whatever, as a second shift manager at Jimmy John's. And
so what was your perspective when you left? I mean, this is your friend that you...
So we had meetings. I mean, we, basically, it was a sinking ship. We didn't have a business license at the time because we couldn't get zoning. We had a lot of different hurdles and stuff to go through. And I told Dave, I was like, we got to start over. And, I told him, I was like, we have a lot of promises that we are over promising, and it was really difficult to get ourselves out of these because, say, we were lowballing an estimate, and we were doing jobs for negative. I mean, we were losing money like crazy. So we were not only working 14-hour days every day, but we were also paying customers to work on their cars. So I basically said, hey, I've got a reputation for doing good work, and your ship's sinking. I got to go save my ship. So because I had a great job. I had left the commercial cabling industry and started doing shade tree jobs, mobile, bouncing around, and we had some meetings, and we just needed to let that company dissolve. A friend from college kept calling me, and he said, hey man, you got to come meet this guy up in Lawrenceville. And I'm like, Dave. And he's like, yeah, Dave, you know him? I'm like, yeah, I've known Dave forever. And I tried working there, and it's not working out. And he kept calling me. Finally, I started showing up again. We're like, all right, we're going to fix this. It's ruined, but we got to fix it. He disappeared one day, and it's been 5 years since I've even talked to him. He actually just called 2-3 months ago out of nowhere. Somebody got my number. He doesn't have Facebook or anything. His name's Rick Johnson, so I couldn't even Google him or look him up or Facebook him or anything. And he's like, how you guys been doing? And he's like, I've been down in Florida. We're like, you just bailed on it. He literally never showed up one day for work and just left us hanging, me and Dave. And we're like, dude, we got a crazy thing going on now. Like, we've got this awesome shop and great team. And, where'd you go? You just disappeared on us. But, he thought the same thing. I mean, it was a sinking ship. So Dave and I worked our differences out. One reason why I feel like we are successful in a sense is our communication. So if we ever have an issue, we stop right then and there. We hash it out, and we encourage that amongst all of our teammates. And we got our second location as of about 3 weeks ago, and they never had that culture there. So if you have an issue, if you hash out right away, you don't build animosity, you don't have resentment towards anybody, and you can just figure out a solution promptly and right then and there. So that's how we kind of got off onto a better foot. We would call customers back that we knew weren't happy. We ended up hiring another guy, and I remember sending him all the way out to Alabama to pick a car up that we had done a 6-speed swap on, but at the time couldn't do all the computer and some of the extra wiring needed. And we brought the car back, fixed all the stuff, called the customer, said, hey, we got everything fixed for you. He goes, oh my goodness, like, would you go ahead and just do a whole bunch of maintenance for us? We're like, you want us to hire us for more work? And he's like, yeah. And we sold him some very discounted retail service, but it was money in the bank. And for the first time, we're like, oh my gosh, we can make money. And one of our very original customers, whose car is actually here right now, believe it or not, same car. She came in for routine service from a referral, word of mouth, and she spent maybe $1,200 with us or $1,500, and it was probably 15 or 20 or 30 hours of labor, and it was crazy. And we knocked it all out in 2 days, and we're like, okay, now we can make money, because that was rent right there. So we started figuring that out. And
now you're still in Lawrenceville at this point.
Yeah, underneath an out of basement strip mall. I remember
no license, no.
We were in the process, so there was a lot of politics to get the business license.
Believe me, I know in Gwinnett.
Yeah.
I think we got it in February of 13.
Actually, it's a little easier being in Lawrenceville. If you're outside of Lawrenceville, it can get really nuts.
Yeah.
You are now, right? You're in Lawrenceville.
Yeah, we're still in Lawrenceville,
but it's not the city.
It's still the city.
Oh,
yeah.
good luck.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I tell the story is, Dave was politicking. He was an Eagle Scout, and whether this is entirely true or not, I said, one of the guys that were at the city needed a transmission, and BMW quoted him $9 or $10,000, and we brought it over to the shop and we fixed it for less than $1,000, and we made money on that. We thought that was a great deal. Come to find out, it was an $8,000 job, but we didn't know or care, and we made our money and took care of him, and he kept his car, and he's still a good customer today as well. So he helped maybe push that business license through a little bit.
So now I have that confession. I think the statute of limitations is over.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So we were good, honest kids. We were just working our butts off. We needed some help from somebody.
Oh,
and
well,
we never borrowed $1 until we bought this building.
You earned it. I'm just teasing.
Yeah, no worries.
But but let's go back to some of this. I mean, you guys are just basically, hair on fire, running through the future. At what point did you begin to do you have any vision of this? Did you kind of, you were saying you were looking for a job, and then all of a sudden that just didn't fit for you. What happened there?
I'll tell my side of the story.
Tell your side of it.
I graduate, so my family business is voice and data cabling, commercial construction. I've been in the business since I was a little kid, pulling cable out in all the different buildings around Atlanta. So I graduated college with a business degree, went into project management and sales, and was doing really well. My stepmom or boss at the time brought me in her office on a biweekly pay Friday, and she goes, I can just tell you're not as happy as you should be. I'm like, what do you mean? It's bi-weekly pay. I'm getting paid today. I got friends I'm hanging out with this weekend. Life is good. Like, what could you mean? She's like, well, I know you love the car thing. Why don't you go start your own business before you've got a house and a kid and a wife and other responsibilities? Right now is the time.
Before you get trapped.
Yeah. And so I was like, man, that's deep. Like, did she tell me to quit? I just closed out a bunch of my projects and really good margins and this and that. And so I thought about it over the weekend. I walked in Monday and I go, here's my 2 weeks. One of my good friends is bringing me to Europe. I'm going. They've got the most snow that they've ever had in 100 years. I'm going snowboarding. This is a trip of a lifetime. All my projects are perfectly closing. So I'm not going to leave the company high and dry with anything because it's very in-depth. Like if a project manager leaves, it's going to leave them hanging. And so she's like, no, we need months of notice here. You got to have a month's notice. 2 weeks isn't enough. And I said, the stars have aligned. You did this, and I'm out. And so I left, and a 10-day trip turned into over 20 because I didn't have a job. I didn't know what to come back to America to do. And I was just,
why come? And you're there.
Yeah, I was just bouncing around. I was making friends and living on what little savings I had, and ended up at the University of West England and was bumming at a friend's dorm and hanging out with a bunch of cool people. And I have the American accent, and so I'm like the exotic person over there in England, and it was a great time. And Dave's calling me saying, help me, come back, I got a job for you, and this and that. And so after 20 some odd days, I ended up coming back, and me and Dave started working, and that's probably when we started getting deep into it. And it was crazy.
So your sense of passion, did it come from the wrenching and the work of that part of it?
That's a quick 2-second excerpt. I remember we went to go see a movie when I was 15, and the movie was sold out, and our friend's older brother was like, well, let's see Fast and Furious. And I was like, I've never even heard of that. And we walked into the movie having no idea what was going on about it at all. And we walked out of that movie making car sounds and running around, shifting and all this stuff. And my birthday was coming up, so I'm like, oh man, I want a Toyota Supra. And I grew up in Alpharetta, Milton area, and all my friends are driving brand new $30,000 cars, and I'm looking up Supras. I'm like, okay, they're $30,000. I'm like, my parents will get me one of those. And they were getting divorced at the time, so I go to my dad. I'm like, hey, I want a Toyota Supra for my first car. And he's like, he opens up an Excel spreadsheet. He's like, let me show you how hard it is to earn $30,000. I'm like, sure, no problem, And he starts doing the math. He's like, how about you make $10 an hour after you get out of class? And I'm like, okay. He's like, let's make it 12 because you're really good. I'm like, great, And he starts doing more math, and pretty much just to even save up $10,000, I'd have to work every day after school until I graduate. Never have time to hang out with friends or have a girlfriend or do anything, and spend all my money just to save up a $10,000 car. So he starts looking up $10,000 cars, and there's no Supra for $10,000, or the one that was like from the early '80s and not the Supra I wanted, and blah blah blah. So I cried. I go to my mom. She goes, "Yeah, your dad's an a-hole. I'm gonna get you a car." And she goes and buys me a '95 M3 because my neighbor down the street was a big BMW guy, and so she goes and buys me a '95 M3. Crashed it and totaled it and flipped it in my neighborhood before I even turned 16. And I was good friends with David Harrison at the time, and he just shakes his head and he's like, told you. And my dad's like, told you too. And so I bought that same family's Toyota Camry for $2,000 with the rest of my money, and thought I would never have another BMW again. And so my goal was to have a BMW. And so I worked, and I saved up and bought a 328 like Dave, a 97. Dave had a 98. I think I spent $3,600 on it, and proceeded to break it and stuff like that. And my dad wouldn't help me pay for it, and my mom did the best she could. And then I started just telling my mom that, yeah, Dad paid for it, don't worry about it. Dad paid for this, don't worry about it. I was just fixing it. And my first customer, I met a guy walking into Kroger, at Crab Apple Kroger over in Alpharetta. He goes, oh, nice 3 Series. You know anyone that works on them? And I go, I work on them. And he's like, oh, really? I got a UUC short shift kit and some other things I want to do on my car. I was like, I'll do it. And so literally, like, some of my very first projects I ever did, a customer that I'd met in the parking lot of a Crab Apple Kroger paid me money to work on his car. And he ended up getting hit head on, ran over and messed him up real bad. And he took me all the way up to Ohio, and we bought an M3. And then I worked on that for him as well. And that's kind of how I got
So you did a road trip to go get an M3.
Yep. and he paid me like $200 to go with him. And I did a PPI at this dealership, and I didn't even know what the PPI. I didn't even know what to look at back then. But I'm just looking for anything that looked out of the normal, and pretty much how I got my start.
So you got your creds in addition to the business acumen. You did certainly work with your parents in the business, and that helped bring some stuff to the table.
Yeah.
So tell me, in terms of the just curiously, because I get where you are. Last night I was at the Gwinnett meet,
Oh, cool.
and I took one of the cabriolets over, and the kids were all over it. I got Magnus Walker to sign the hood.
No way.
Because I worked with him at SEMA.
Nice.
So they were like, wow. And there's one little car, I'll show you the picture afterwards, and I'll try and put it into the video if I can figure out how to do that. There's an old CRX in the corner. Not bad shape, no rust.
Yeah.
Paint kind of, a little patina, but not bad. Inside was clean. Lowered. Camber in the back, nothing too crazy, but it was definitely cambered.
Yeah.
And obviously a little bit of a tuner. What could he have in it? $2,000, maybe $3,000. And on the front, he had a license plate and it said "Send nudes."
Nice.
I didn't get to meet this kid, but this is a kid I really like.
Yeah.
And then we had, the DJ there, and Sonny and all his BMW friends, and it's a good time. So I get where you are. A lot of the collector car people don't. They don't. I really could get more people over there. I did get Brent over there with his '66 Impala yesterday,
Nice.
and the kids love this stuff, but they don't see it,
Yeah.
and they don't really have the time to get out to car shows and sit around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so so I've been doing a lot of trying to bring all this together. And it doesn't sound to me like you guys have much time for car shows. Tell me about your racing connection. How did that happen?
Essentially, back in '07, I actually had been doing halfway decent, and with fixing cars and so on and so forth. Student loan people were still lending me money, so I had a little bit of money. So I did a couple.
And who's this?
What?
Who's lending you money?
Student loan people.
Student loans.
Yes.
God, boy, that's a hole you can dig into.
Yeah. So, young and dumb. So I had, spare cash flow, some. So I did a couple track events in like '07. Ironically, we were at the same track event.
Tomorrow is the 11th anniversary of my very first track day. It was Dave's second track day, but tomorrow is the 11th anniversary of that.
Awesome.
So
are you going to be on the track?
Tomorrow? Oh, I could probably go.
Yeah.
I should go somewhere.
But did a couple of track events back in '07, then ran out of money, so then I started autocrossing, because it's,
cheaper.
It's instead of $400, it's $40.
Yeah.
And
takes the crap out of your car.
Yeah. And then I actually started doing drifting as well, which is also $30-$40.
So where'd you do that? Up at Lanier?
No, this is way Lanier. They just did that 2 years ago. This is way back. There was a spot out in Marietta, and then there was Nopi used to do drift events inside of Atlanta.
Yeah, I remember that.
So
I remember the one in Marietta. I was out there with Little Red.
Yeah. So I would do the Nopi drift events in Atlanta before Atlanta kicked out all the drifter kids for shenanigans. But I would drive down from Clemson and spend $40 in gas, and then $40 for the drift event and some random used tires I found at, Uncle Bob's in South Carolina. And
sometimes used tires do better than the others.
Yeah. So
they burn a little better.
Did that for a while, '07, '08, '09, thereabouts, while I didn't have any money. All the while Rob was still doing a lot of track events.
I found that track events are cheaper than speeding tickets. There's no laws but the laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the most fun you'll ever have with your clothes on.
That's right.
That's what someone told me.
So when we got back together in 12, 13-ish, I actually hadn't been on the track in years, but all the while in college, I'd help Rob build his Spec E36 race car. He'd bring like the trailing arms up for me to press the wheel bearings in and out and stuff like that. And so he'd actually started doing it competitively a little in 12?
Yeah.
So he just started competing, and then we got together hardcore in 13. And so he got me back out on the track. I did an AMP event. One of his customers had a AMP pass, and we got out on AMP. I hadn't been on the track in like 4 or 5 years, done drifting and all that stuff, and so I had all that terrible swerving around and everything. It's, oh no, what are you doing?
Like me on the computer with a Ferrari steering wheel. I can't seem to figure out how to hold it on.
Funny, Dave just mentioned that. The Facebook does the reminders 6 years ago or whatever. So I just got the reminder. Dave and I were up till 2 a.m. the night before my very first wheel-to-wheel BMW CCA club race, because my sponsor at the time didn't fully have my car prep, didn't even inform me on all the different stuff. Dave's like, hey, you need an electrical kill switch, you need all this, that, and the other, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And we were up till 2 a.m. the night before my race, and there's all these. Dave posted a picture, and I'm standing there with no shirt on, covered in grease, probably working on this thing, and it made that other company mad, and because they saw Dave as a threat or competition, and now they are probably not even really around. I don't know. Haven't heard from them. So.
Well, they may very well be a customer and they're not telling you.
Yeah. But so Rob got me driving, and so 13 and 14, I did a bunch of track events in my E30 at the time. We would literally strap. He was racing, so we would go to the BMW CCA events all over the east side of the country. So I would strap his race wheels and tires to the roof of my E30, and we drove to Mid-Ohio once.
Really?
Yeah.
No truck or trailer.
No truck or trailer. What?
What track?
Mid-Ohio.
Really?
Yeah. It's 10 hours, 11.
10 and a half. 11,
and so I put 2 wheels and tires on my roof. He got one in his trunk and one on his roof, and we drove with our 2 techs that we still have today up there.
No windows in the rain.
No windows, no AC, no heat, no nothing. Drove all the way up there in the race cars.
Set the track record.
Really?
Yeah.
And everyone thought my car was, like a cheater car. I'm like, I don't even. And then they look at it, and I'm like, I don't even have any gauges.
We have no trailer, no tent. We have like a pile of our tools, like an old Craftsman bag and blah blah. That's all we brought.
And all the other guys are sitting there with their screens with the computer feedback.
Yeah.
Out there just doing it. My God, I love it.
We double sessioned his car and my car. Drove it, tracked it all weekend, and then drove it all the way back to Atlanta.
Not even unpack it, and then the next weekend drive 6 hours to VIR.
Yeah.
Still no truck or trailer. Wheel to wheel race it there, and
so we did that for.
That was our passion.
So tell me, just before we go too far with that,
Yeah.
because I don't like to break you off too
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
But did you see the race part of this?
Help
you with the business vision?
Yes, extremely, because we were super passionate about that, and so we were performance racing enthusiast initially, and that's again what I started doing, the custom engine swaps, and then we got into the race car side of things and started. We'd go to the track together, and he would race and win, and then everyone wants to talk to the guy that who's working on your car and so on and so forth. And well, we got a shop down in Lawrenceville, and so we were for about 2 or 3 years. Every time we would do a track event like at Road Atlanta or AMP, we would, it's kind of a crappy situation, but we would end up towing a car back with us. Like somebody would drive the car and it would blow up.